Senator and Senate Republican Leader Rob Ort. I want to thank my colleagues for being here today. Particularly, I want to thank Senator Martins, Senator Weber, Senator Canzoneri Fitzpatrick, Senator Oberacker, and Senator Joe Griffo, all of whom were a part of the Senate Republican Anti-Semitism Task Force, Anti-Semitism Working Group. This was I don't want to say an idea, but it was talked about, and we decided to do this long before the events of October 7th and what's going on overseas and in Israel and in Gaza today. This was actually talked about in, I think it was the winter of 23, with Senator Martins and I, and then we put this group together, and they conducted, which I'll let them talk about, multiple roundtables. I'll let Senator Martins talk about the work that the group did, and which ultimately led to a package of legislation to address the threat and the growing scourge of anti-Semitism, which is, I think, very important here in New York. New York is home to the largest population of Jews outside of the nation of Israel. And that really binds New York State with what happens in Israel and what happens to the Jewish nation. And when what happened in October 7th, I happened to be in Israel in August. I was there with Senator Jake Ashby. And it really, the amount of folks that we met in Israel who grew up in New York, who grew up in Long Island, who grew up in New York City, who now live in Israel, who still have family over here, who come back and forth. That connection is a very unique connection, yes, between America and Israel, but between New York specifically and Israel. And I believe we have an obligation as elected New York legislators to speak out, not only on anti-Semitism, but to protect our Jewish citizens and to speak out for the Jewish nation, especially in light of what we've seen since October 7th. I don't think Senator Martins or the working group are going to pretend that those events did not impact the final report and some of the legislation that has come out. But I think this has probably never been more important. We were going to do this anyways. We were going to be here today anyway, speaking about this, but it has just become more prescient, more poignant, and maybe more important than ever that we are here. And I want to thank all of our conference for being here and for standing with our members who put all the work in and put the effort in, but also standing with, New Yorkers, standing with our Jewish population here in New York, but also standing with the Jewish population around the globe and certainly the nation of Israel. And there was a day when this would have been a very bipartisan thing. Unfortunately, that's not today. Increasingly, there are members across on the other side of the aisle and those across the globe and across New York who have stood with Hamas and stood with a terror network. We have elected leaders who have stood with a terror network. We have elected leaders who've called on the elected government of Israel to step down while allowing a terror network to remain in place. So the idea that anti-Semitism is just this, this talking point, it's a growing threat. It is a growing problem. And when you have elected officials giving credence or giving shelter in their words or in their actions even to a terror network, that only emboldens anti-Semitism and those who would make anti-Semitic remarks or advocate for anti-Semitic legislation or policies. And so, again, I want to thank Senator Martins and his team and my other colleagues on this group for doing the work to come up with the bills and the package of legislation. And this doesn't end here for us. This is really the beginning. We're going to continue to advocate for this legislation. We're going to continue to speak out against anti-Semitism, and we're going to continue to speak up for, New Yorkers, Jewish New Yorkers, and Jews across the world, and certainly in the nation of Israel. And with that, I want to call up my colleague, the chair of this working group and this task force, and someone who spent countless of hours traveling the state and putting this package together, and that is Senator Jack Martins.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with all of you. I'm sad on this topic. You know, we, as a country, we always hold ourselves as being a tolerant country. New York State has always been tolerant. Our residents are tolerant, and we have been at the forefront of every civil rights movement in the history of this country, to its very inception. And so when we understood that in 2022, anti-Semitic hate crimes had doubled in New York City to 223. We understood from our own communities, from conversations we had in my district, and some of my colleagues had in their district, that we needed to have a closer look as to why, when we talk about tolerance and we talk about protected classes, why is it that time and time again there are excuses made for why it's okay to treat Jews differently? Hate crimes, BDS movements, rampant on college campuses, supporting anti-Jew initiatives. We've all heard, unfortunately, about students on college campuses being singled out and persecuted because of their faith. And frankly, if this were any other class, they would be protected, there would be uniform outcry, fill in the blank. If that class was subject to what we have seen on college campuses and across this state, we would do something about it. And yet, the media, the majorities in this place, and society as a whole seems to think it's okay for us to go ahead and allow for things to happen as part of a normal process here in New York, and it's not. So in February of last year, Leader Ort organized and announced this task force, February of 2023, well before October 7th, and the members of this task force set off on meeting with our local communities, having conversations with Jewish leaders, students in our local communities, and holding roundtables, which eventually led to this task force report, which we will be emailing out to everyone. So I want to take the opportunity to thank the members of the task force, Senator Weber, Senator Canzoneri Fitzpatrick, Senator Oberacher, Senator Griffo, and in a special way, thank Leader Ort for the initiative in putting this together and allowing us the opportunity to shed a spotlight on what's a very important issue. So through these efforts, we had roundtables in Rockland County, we had roundtables in Nassau County, and we had meetings with various groups. We came up with legislation that we are proposing as part of this task force going forward that will add real teeth to the efforts to combat anti-Semitism in New York. But it starts with one principle, and that is we revert to where we were at our inception and who we have been historically. Leaders in the civil rights movement, we stand up for our communities, we stand up for Jews here in New York, and there is no place in New York where there can be hate and where we will allow hate as a form of everyday culture. So I will tell you, I have a piece of legislation that I have introduced that will hold protesters accountable when they disrupt, frankly, our daily lives, be it in New York City. We've seen it at Grand Central Station. We've seen it on bridges. We've seen it on roadways, highways, where they turn around and, ladies and gentlemen, let's make no mistake. Let's not conflate the attacks in Israel and however you feel about Israel and Hamas for how Jews are being treated in New York. We will not allow our colleagues in this building to conflate Zionism and Israeli issues with mistreating Jews right here in New York. That's not going to happen. We've put forth a list of initiatives. I'll ask my colleagues to speak to their issues in particular and the bills that we have, but we call on the governor and the majority leader and the speaker to move these bills and provide protections for Jews in New York. It's time New York restored its mantle as the center of tolerance in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take the opportunity to introduce my dear colleague, Senator Bill Weber. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Senator Martins, and I'm State Senator Bill Weber. I represent Rockland County, which has the most Jewish people per capita of any county in New York State, so I proudly represent Rockland County. You know, I was proud to host an anti-Semitism roundtable in Rockland on September 19th at the Clarkstown Town Hall. Our roundtable was moderated by Rabbi David Hoffman, the editor of the Monsey Mavasser. A member of the roundtable is also here. Ramapo Police Chief Martin Riley has joined us here today along with Captain Danny Hyman. Thank you for coming to this event today. The two bills that I've introduced as part of this legislative package are S-7752, which is called the Combating Campus Antisemitism Act. It prohibits the granting of tuition assistance awards to any student who has knowingly engaged in promoting anti-Semitism in any manner that is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action that constitutes true threats. I introduced this legislation due to the alarming increase in openly anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses, those that Senator Martins recently referred to as becoming more and more commonplace, and this legislative initiative is something that obviously needs to be addressed immediately. I also introduced Senate Bill 7040, which expands the criteria for hate crimes to include trespassing committed at houses of worship. This is a crucial step in protecting the religious communities in our state from being the victims of hate crimes and safeguarding our citizens' right of religious freedom under the Constitution. You know, these two bills were introduced as part of an entire legislative package that's included in this report. These are bills that make sense, that should have bipartisan support. There is no reason, and I think Leader Ord and Senator Martins alluded to it earlier, there's no reason why these type of bills should not garner bipartisan support in 2024 New York, a state that's been the leader and at the forefront of the civil rights movement and civil rights legislative and initiatives throughout the years. These are the civil rights bills of today's age that need to be initiated. As I've said many times, hate is taught. We all have the responsibility to end the teaching of falsehoods of anti-Semitism. It's no secret that anti-Semitism has ramped up in New York State and across this country. Anti-Semitism was running unchecked before October 7th and has only increased since then, both on social media and in the real world. I'm grateful to my colleagues here today and local stakeholders who contributed ideas towards abating this epidemic, resulting in today's report. Let's take this report and this legislation that's introduced because of the great work of ending anti-Semitism. We need to make sure that this happens. It's not just a talking point. It's not just a press conference, but we take these legislation into action. With that, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Captain Martin Riley. Captain Martin Riley and Captain Danny Hyman do incredible work keeping the residents of Ramapo and Rockland County as a whole safe every day, and I'm happy to have him here today. Thank you, Chief.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everyone who contributed to this New York State Senate's report on anti-Semitism. This is of critical importance in our current times. In our society, there should be zero tolerance for anti-Semitism. Police departments across New York State stand resolute in our dedication to ensuring the safety and security of every individual, regardless of their race, religion, or background. We will investigate and pursue charges in any incidents of anti-Semitism, collaborating with our political leaders and community partners Your police officers are committed to providing a safe environment for all. Thank you.
With that, we have Senator Patricia Canzoneri Fitzpatrick from Long Island. Patricia?
I too want to thank Leader Ort, Senator Jack Martins, and all the senators that have worked on this committee. As was stated, this was an idea that we put in place long before the dreadful attack in Israel. I too went to Israel back in September, only 1 month before the attack, and that allowed me to truly understand the beauty of that country and how important it is to our relationship with New York and the United States. As was stated, I ran into many people who came from New York, had people, families still here in Israel, back and forth. It's a beautiful country that deserves our support. What's going on today has only escalated since the attack on October 7th. And that's mind-boggling to me, because if anything, I would have thought there would have been more sympathy for our brothers and sisters of Jewish descent. Instead, it has escalated anti-Semitic attacks, and I quite simply cannot understand why we've gone in that direction, but it makes the work of this task force that much more important. As was stated, the attacks and the anti-Semitic hate that continues on our college campuses must end. Our youth, our teenagers, our most impressionable young adults are being inundated with anti-Semitic views and policies. So that's why the bill that I've proposed, Senate Bill 7773, entitled the Dismantling Student Anti-Semitism Act, is critical, because what we will do is require CUNY and SUNY campuses to put into place policies to prevent what is going on, and quite simply, if they don't, their funding will not be provided through state aid. How else do you get somebody to really think about this other than to look at their funding and know that they won't be able to continue without state support if they don't, in fact, do what we're asking them to do? And again, as was said, this should have bipartisan support, because all we're asking is for anti-Semitic hate to be given the same weight as any other hate crime. If it was any other minority group, we would simply not stand for it. So why is it allowed against Jews? Why is it that a student or a professor on a CUNY or SUNY campus has to wonder if they will be safe on the day that they're on campus and among their colleagues and other students? I am hopeful that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will see this as an opportunity to address an issue. And that's why I'm incredibly proud of our task force. Not only are we pointing out a problem, but we are offering solutions. And that is what I believe the Republican Conference is so good at. We are looking at problems and coming up with real ways of solving them. We're not just gaslighting. We're not just saying there's a problem. We know how to fix them. And that's why I am truly honored to be part of this. And representing the 5 towns on Long Island, I know how important this legislation is, so that they can continue to feel safe. We owe that to every New Yorker, and I am proud to be part of that. With that, I'd like to introduce Senator Peter Oberacker, who was part of the task force and a dear colleague. Peter.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Leader Ort, for recognizing the need for this special working group. And thank you to our chairman, Senator Martins, for your tireless efforts in putting this committee and moving us forward. And of course, to my colleagues and everyone that is here today. Even more so, I want to thank those from the Jewish community who were instrumental in helping develop this legislative package. So many individuals took the time to tell deeply personal stories of real-life tragedies. I truly admire all who spoke with us and the courage that they displayed. It is deeply troubling that this special Senate panel was even needed at all. But as we all have witnessed, violent acts in the name of anti-Semitism have been on the rise here in New York. And we must take a decisive and direct action to halt these disturbing crimes. Ever since the terrorist attack on Israel last October, there has been an uptick of hate crimes against Jewish Americans, and that includes the display of Nazi symbols. It is done as a type of harassment and intimidation, and it makes people feel unsafe in their neighborhoods and at their schools and at their synagogues, and that needs to end. My bill, S-8774, is simple and straightforward. It will criminalize the display of Nazi symbols, giving police and prosecutors another tool to charge those who are targeting Jewish individuals. It's time here in Albany to make all of these bills an immediate priority to ensure no one comes under attack because of their faith and or their religion. And in recent weeks, I've heard many people here at the Capitol say that the state budget is about priorities. Well, if that's true, then let's show New Yorkers and those of the Jewish faith that ending anti-Semitism is a priority. Add these bills to the state budget, because if we don't, then I really have to question the priorities here in Albany. I'll leave you with 3 words: fair, equitable, and inclusiveness. Those aren't just words, those are actions. My colleagues from across the aisle, time is now. Act. Thank you. I will. Yeah, you can applaud, that's fine, that's fine. And it is with great pleasure that I get a chance to introduce and bring to the podium my colleague, Senator Joe Griffo. Joe?
I want to thank the leader and also our chair, Senator Martins, as well as the members of the conference who are all here today. If I had a chance, I would kill every single one of you Jews. Every single one of you. These hateful words were uttered by an individual and documented by the United States Attorney's Office. On the same day, the same individual, according to reports, threatened a synagogue in Florida. For evil to flourish only requires good men to do nothing. These are the words of Jewish Austrian writer Sean Wiesenthal. Anti-Semitic threats, attacks, and vandalism have increased across this state and across this nation. These acts are reprehensible, they are unacceptable, and they cannot in any way be tolerated. There must be accountability and there must be consequence to this activity. And the recommendations that have been outlined in this report, advanced today, include a number of proposals. And that's based upon many of our colleagues here listening and soliciting input from those who have faced this and have engaged in this. That's why the recommendations that have been proposed reflect what we need and believe has to happen in order to confront anti-Semitism and to provide a means to prevent this from happening in the future. We should not ignore this, but address this. We cannot sit idle, but undertake action to ensure that this does not happen again. And we cannot and must not be silent and inactive while people are in fear and they also feel tormented. For evil to flourish, all that is required is for good men to do nothing. Let's ensure that we do something. With that, I would ask Senator Martins to conclude.
So, ever since October 7th, there's been an effort and a a constant refrain from some of our colleagues here in Albany, making excuses for anti-Semitic acts occurring across New York State, and most particularly attacking our Jewish communities where they live, where they worship, where they work, and where their children attend schools, all on the premise that it's okay because it's all being done in an effort to combat Israel. But these are people right here in New York. And I must stress that when we discuss any issue having to do with fairness, equity, inclusiveness, we always hear a refrain: silence is violence. Silence is violence. So I'll ask you, ask our colleagues here why they're silent. Ask our colleagues here why they're not advancing legislation to address this. Ask them why they took out hate crimes from this year's budget. Ask them why they have not included more funding for synagogues and yeshivas so that they can provide security at a time when we know that anti-Semitism has been spiking and the incidents of hate and conflict have increased. Ask them why they've remained silent, and ask them to justify that to New York, to our Jewish communities in New York. We're better than this as a state. This isn't who we are. We have stood with Israel. We have stood with our Jewish communities here in New York. We will continue to do that. We ask our majority conferences here in the Senate and in the Assembly and the governor to do the same thing. The time to act is now. And so with that, let me again thank Leader Ort for the initiative in putting this together, in seeing the need for this at a time when others did not. Because after October 7th, ladies and gentlemen, it became clear. In February of 23, not so clear, but he saw it. And that's why we're here today. So to close, Leader.
Senator, thank you very much. Thank you. God bless you. I want to thank Senator Martins again and all the members who spoke. Again, the great work that they did. And I want to, something Senator Canzoneri Fitzpatrick said, this conference is not just here to point out where the Democrats aren't addressing real problems, but we're offering real solutions. This conference represents millions of New Yorkers collectively, and we are here to provide solutions, to provide answers, to provide policy solutions, and we hope our colleagues across the aisle will pick these up. There's no pride of authorship necessarily. Let's get them passed. Let's get them done. As Senator Griffo said, do something. Not just stand by and sort of say it's a problem. You know, boy, it's really awful. This is a real concrete step forward to protecting communities right here in New York who do not feel as safe as they should and as they once did. And so we have to combat that and do something about it. So with that, if there's a question on any of the proposals, please direct them, towards Senator Martins or the group. If there's off topic, then I'm happy to take any off topic questions.
There's no place for hate anywhere. The same sentiments that we bring to this task force, I would think that would apply to everyone. This has been our conference's position time and time again. The issue here is every time we turn around, and frankly, I can tell you about my communities on Long Island. I can tell you my communities in the greater metropolitan area. Many of my constituents go to work in New York City. Their students, their kids are going to school in New York City, whether it's private or public colleges. And I've had people tell me, my child can no longer wear a yarmulke in public or has to hide their Star of David. There is no place for that. Now, I have not seen the kinds of incidents in my communities that you speak of. I do also have large Muslim communities in my district. We have great relationships and we have ongoing discussions with them. So if there is a spike, frankly, happy to work with those communities as well. But the sentiment here that we're talking about is that there is undeniably a spike and an increase societally in anti-Semitism before October 7th and post October 7th, undeniably. And there's a need for action as a state on how we're going to combat it. We can't just ignore it, and we can address other issues as well. Senator Felder is a colleague. He's a friend. He's certainly someone who understands the topics we speak of here today and the efforts that we're trying to move forward. I have not spoken to him personally. I will not speak for Simca, but I'm happy to have these discussions with him as we go forward. But I know, we all know Senator Felder. He is a staunch defender of the Jewish community, and I'm sure, without speaking for him, that he also stands with us on these issues. Thank you.